How important is creating cultural understanding and building and maintaining diplomatic relations with China? And what can be done to strengthen this understanding in the political and public arena? So first to you, John.
Well, that's a great question, which means, of course, I'm not exactly sure how to answer it, but it is an important component. The Chinese always look at relationships in the broad, and they certainly place a value on a political relationship, and then, of course, on the trade and economic. They also place a great value on what they call the people-to-people links. And I think one of the reasons they stress this, because they realize, as in fact do people here, that you are talking across quite distinct cultural barriers. I think we do quite a lot in that area. Obviously, it's been limited in the past few years because of the inability to have people-to-people links. And I'm still struck by the fact that we do tend to compartmentalize, that there are a lot of people who are extremely famous in China who aren't known at all in New Zealand, and vice versa. So there's, I think, much we can do in terms of both bringing writers and publishers here, or in arranging groups to come to go from New Zealand to China to display our culture and so on. So to me, it's an important part of an overall robust relationship.
Yes, that's right. If you're building a well-balanced relationship, you bring into it sport, the arts, culture, film. Sister cities have played quite an important role in the past. Trade, obviously, and then the politics kind of sits in and around that. But it's not a one-dimensional relationship where it's just about trade or just about geopolitics and what's happening in the South China Sea. It's got to be broader than that, and we have to remember that there's a very sizable diaspora from China in New Zealand as well, and that can be a strength for us. In that those families retain links. There's commercial links that come from that, and it helps, I think, build the more rounded relationship.
Thank you, Helen. Next question will again put to both of you. US Secretary of State Tony Blinken said today that the door is very much open for New Zealand and other partners to engage in the proposed AUKUS Pillar 2. How likely do you think that is, and how would it impact the careful line we tread with China? So first to you, Helen, then to you, John.
Well, I think China's made it pretty clear what it thinks of AUKUS, which it sees as aimed at it in sort of blunt terms. But for New Zealand, I mean, we're told that officials are exploring it, and officials will do what the officials will do. But what advantage is there to New Zealand, and what disadvantage? You have to go into this with a pros and cons approach, and there will be concern that here, and I feel it myself, that the independent foreign policy was hard fought for and pretty easily sacrificed. So what is it that you would purportedly get out of AUKUS Pillar 2 that, in terms of defence supplies or whatever, which you couldn't get by other means through other ways we have of relating to those particular partners? So I would be a bit inclined to park AUKUS 2 myself and say, well, case not proven that this is useful. But look, in the fullness of time, no doubt the officials will produce something which one would hope would be really looking at all the pros and cons and how engagement would affect positively or negatively New Zealand's current positioning. But I'm not one either who advocates vast expenditure in defence. I think there's a very minor player. Defence equipment's very costly. As one who put an end to the strike wing of the Air Force after being advised that in 35 years of having it, it hadn't fired a single shot in anger, and only one over the bow of a fishing boat, there was obviously the question, what are we putting the money into it for? So yeah, I'm a skeptic, but I don't think we're on the brink of any decisions by the government about this at all. I think it's just kind of milling around in official discussion and exploration at the moment.
If I can just add my tuppence worth as a former official, so doing things slightly differently, but I think the critical thing, I would agree, is that New Zealand has to evaluate the value to New Zealand of this linkage, and then if we decide it's worthwhile, we should go ahead with it. And it's not something, I think, where we can sit here and say, oh well, country X might not like it, so we shouldn't do it. I think we have to form our own view, and we have to then decide, well, this will be something which will be helpful in terms of amplifying our position or not. And I think that's, as I understand it, is the work that's going on at the moment. So I think we're a little way off any particular decision. But it's something which I think if countries of the kinds who are participating in this have spoken to us about it, we want to take it seriously, and we want to be able to think carefully about whether it's in New Zealand's interest to be part of it.
Thank you, John. Next question for you, Helen, and John, feel free to come in at the end as well. How does or can New Zealand assert its position effectively on human rights, for example, with respect to the treatment of ethnic minorities within China, such as the Uyghurs, and at the same time maintain positivity on trade and diplomacy? I know you've talked about that a little in the webinar so far, Helen, but the second part of the question asks what lessons can be learned from the approach we've applied with China, and could that be applied to other relationships? And the example cited is the GCC Gulf Cooperation Council states in the Middle East.
Well, what I can say is that in every bilateral meeting I've ever done with the counterpart in another country, I've always had a full brief from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and other interested ministries, and that brief will always tell me what the hard issues are, and the hard issues are raised, but they're not raised. It's not like you're going in and the first thing you say to the president of China or Egypt or whoever it is I've come here to talk to you about human rights. It's rather going back to the point John made before. We have rounded relationships with countries, right? We have things we agree on, with things we partner on. There's things we try to do together, but then there's some things where we just don't agree, and where, because of our value system, living in a democratic society which does its best to uphold human rights, we feel we have to say something, and we do. Now, the question says, can New Zealand assert its position effectively? Well, whether anything we say has any effect or impact whatsoever is another matter, but I can assure you we do assert our position or our view at the same time as we are looking to build on the areas of the relationship which are in very much in the interests of New Zealand. So you just have to use that phrase again, walk and chew gum.
I would agree in the sense that this is a complex relationship. It's never going to be easier, and we always have to be balancing those different elements, including representations on human rights. I have nothing much to do with the GCC, so I won't get into that. But I will say that when in my various times in China, I had a number of discussions about human rights issues with our Chinese interlocutors. And I think it was important that I did so, and that we did it, and that there was no doubt in the Chinese mind that we had strong views about some of these matters. Where it goes from there, as Helen has said, I think that's another matter. But I think it's very important to keep faith with our own people and our own governments and our own values, and that's what we have been doing consistently.